Claire Gibbons had once been the kind of nurse patients remembered years later. The steady voice in the chaos, the calm presence when everything else was falling apart. For over 2 decades, she'd worked the graveyard shift at San Jose Regional Medical Center's trauma unit, where gunshot wounds, overdoses, and mangled car accident victims arrived with sirens screaming and lives hanging by threads. Her colleagues praised her unshakable composure, her ability to function when others froze. But what they didn't know was that Claire's steadiness came from years of practice at hiding the truth. Her trouble began long before that fateful night in 1994. Claire's mother, the woman who'd raised her alone after her father abandoned them, had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim, 6 months, maybe less. Insurance covered the basics, but the experimental treatments that might buy her mother more time, those cost more than Claire earned in 3 years. She'd applied for loans, started a GoFundMe, worked every available overtime shift until exhaustion became her permanent state. Nothing was enough. The medical bills piled up like a death sentence written in red ink, and the bank had already begun foreclosure proceedings on her mother's house, the only home Claire had ever known. Every night, Claire watched people die. She held their hands, whispered comfort, cleaned their bodies with dignity. And every night, she went home to her cramped studio apartment, stared at the impossible numbers on the bills, and felt herself drowning. The pressure was suffocating, the double shifts that left her hands shaking, the emotional weight of losing patients she'd fought to save, the crushing knowledge that she couldn't save the one person who mattered most. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. Food tasted like ash. The world narrowed to a single, desperate question. How much would you sacrifice to save someone you love? Then came February 17th, 1994, 2:47 a.m. Claire was restocking supplies in Trauma Bay 3 when the shooting started. The sound was unmistakable, sharp cracks that echoed through the ER like thunder in a tunnel. Screaming erupted. Someone shouted, "Get down!" Glass shattered. Claire dropped behind a gurney as armed men in dark clothing stormed through the automatic doors, guns raised, hunting someone. The target was a patient who'd been brought in 30 minutes earlier with a bullet wound, a man the intake nurse had quietly identified as Roberto Salazar, a name that made even the veteran cops go tense. Cartel royalty. The execution was swift and brutal. 6 shots, bodies crumpling, then silence, broken only by alarms and the wet sound of blood dripping onto linoleum. When security finally cleared the scene and police swarmed in, Claire stood on shaking legs, her scrubs splattered with someone else's blood. She'd seen death before, but never like this. Never this calculated, this cold. As officers cordoned off the trauma bay and began processing the scene, Claire noticed something everyone else had missed in the chaos. Beneath Roberto Salazar's gurney, kicked partially under a cabinet, was a black duffel bag. The zipper had torn open, and Claire could see what spilled from inside. Neatly banded stacks of $100 bills. So many they seemed obscene, impossible. Her breath caught. Her hands went numb. She glanced around. The police were focused on the bodies, on witness statements, on securing the scene. No one was looking at the gurney. No one had seen the bag. Claire's mind raced with brutal arithmetic. If she reported it, the money would disappear into evidence, then into some government account, bureaucracy, swallowing a whole. Her mother would die. The house would be lost. Nothing would change. What if she didn't report it? Time seemed to slow. Claire looked at the bag, then at her reflection in the darkened window, hollow-eyed, exhausted, desperate. 23 years of doing the right thing. 23 years of playing by rules that had left her with nothing but debt and grief. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it. In one fluid motion, she kicked the bag further under the cabinet, into the shadows. Later, when the chaos subsided and the scene was released, she'd retrieve it, hide it, figure out what to do. That single choice, made in the space between heartbeats, driven by love and desperation and 30 years of crushing poverty, would define the rest of Claire Gibbons' life. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just stolen $30 million from the most dangerous criminal organization in California. And for the next 3 decades, she'd have to live with that secret every single day. 30 years later, Claire Gibbons still worked the night shift at San Jose Regional Medical Center, though now her hair showed threads of silver and her hands bore the faint tremor of a woman who'd seen too much. To her colleagues, she was a fixture, reliable, unflappable, the nurse you wanted when everything went to hell. Dr. Patel called her the backbone of this ER. The younger nurses sought her advice on everything from difficult IVs to navigating hospital politics. No one suspected that the woman who moved through the fluorescent-lit halls with such quiet competence carried a secret that could destroy everything she'd built. Her life had become a carefully orchestrated performance. She still lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Willow Glen, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and brought lunch from home in a faded canvas bag. But 3 times a year, anonymous cashier's checks arrived at the Santa Clara Women's Haven, funding beds for domestic violence survivors. The Esperanza Scholarship Foundation, which sent young Latino women to college, received quarterly donations from a donor who never attended the galas. A free clinic in East San Jose had a mysterious benefactor who covered the cost of medications for uninsured patients. Claire had spent 3 decades turning blood money into hope, one carefully laundered dollar at a time. The early days had been terrifying. After hiding the duffel bag under the cabinet that night in 1994, Claire had waited 3 agonizing hours until the police finally cleared the scene. Her hands shook as she retrieved it, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain someone would hear. She'd stuffed the bag into a biohazard container, wheeled it to the disposal area, and then, during her break, transferred it to her car. 3 separate trips over 4 days, moving the money in medical waste bags that no one would ever question a nurse carrying. Each time, she expected someone to stop her, to ask what she was doing. No one ever did. The news reports started within 48 hours. Cartel seeks missing fortune. $30 million vanished after hospital shooting. Claire barely slept for weeks, jumping at every car door slam, every footstep behind her. But slowly, impossibly, the heat faded. The investigation stalled. The cartel moved on to other wars. And Claire's mother began her experimental treatment, her eyes lighting with hope Claire hadn't seen in months. Learning to launder the money had been its own education. Small investments in legitimate businesses, cashier's checks purchased with cash, donations run through shell companies she created with fake addresses. Nothing large enough to attract attention. Nothing traceable back to a trauma nurse who earned $48,000 a year. Her mother lived 4 more years. 4 years of comfort, dignity, and time Claire would never regret buying, no matter the cost. Now, sitting across from her daughter at their usual lunch spot, a Vietnamese cafe near the hospital, Claire felt the familiar weight of performance settling over her shoulders. Rosemary had her father's eyes, sharp and assessing, and she'd grown into a woman who noticed things. At 31, she was already making a name for herself in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, tracking money launderers and white-collar criminals with the same relentless focus Claire had once brought to saving lives. "Mom, I've been thinking," Rosemary said, picking at her spring rolls. "You've worked at the same hospital for 30 years. You should have way more savings than you do. Have you thought about retirement? Moving somewhere nicer?" Claire's stomach tightened, though her smile never wavered. "I'm comfortable where I am, honey. You know I don't need much. But you can have something. You deserve more than that tiny apartment." Rosemary's voice carried genuine concern, which made it worse. "I make good money now. Let me help you. We could look at condos, maybe something with a view." "Rosemary." Claire's tone was gentle but firm. "I appreciate it, but I'm fine. Really. I've always believed in living simply." The lie tasted like ash, as it always did. The truth was that Claire had money, more than Rosemary could imagine, but it sat in accounts under false names, in investments that couldn't be connected to her, funding causes that would collapse if anyone discovered their source. She lived modestly because anything else would raise questions she couldn't answer. Rosemary sighed, and the conversation moved to safer territory. Rosemary's current case, the logistics of coordinating with DEA on a cartel money laundering investigation. Claire's chest tightened at the word cartel, but she nodded along, asked appropriate questions, played the role of interested mother. She'd been playing roles for so long she sometimes forgot what the truth felt like. As they walked back to the hospital, Claire noticed it again. The black SUV with tinted windows, parked across the street. Same one she'd seen outside her apartment Tuesday night. And again, Thursday morning. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe normally, to keep walking. "You okay, Mom?" Rosemary asked. "You seem distracted. Just tired. Long shift last night." Another lie. Smooth as silk. They hugged goodbye at the hospital entrance, and Claire watched her daughter drive away, the ache in her chest almost unbearable. "I did it for you," she thought. "So you'd never know what it was like to be powerless, to watch someone you love slip away because you couldn't afford to save them." But the justification felt hollow after 30 years. Inside, Claire changed into her scrubs and began her shift, slipping into the familiar rhythm of triage, medications, and crisis management. She'd saved hundreds of lives in this building, maybe thousands. Good work, honest work, work that mattered. So why did that one night in 1994 still feel like murder? At 9 p.m., as she was updating a patient chart, a man approached the nurse's station. Mid-40s, expensive suit, eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth and polite. "I'm trying to track down some information about an incident that happened here in 1994. February 17th. There was a shooting, multiple fatalities. Were you working that night?" Claire's blood turned to ice, though her expression remained professionally neutral. "That was 30 years ago. I'm afraid my memory of specific dates isn't that precise." "Of course." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thought I'd ask. My name is Vicente Ruiz. I'm an independent investigator working on behalf of some families seeking closure." He handed her a card. "If you remember anything, please call." She took the card with steady hands, nodded politely, and watched him walk away. Only when he was gone did she let herself look down at the name printed in neat letters. Her 30 years of carefully constructed peace had just ended. Vicente Ruiz had been 26 years old the night Roberto Salazar died, a promising young lieutenant in the Sinaloa cartel's financial operations. While others handled distribution and enforcement, Vicente managed the money, tracking shipments, balancing ledgers, ensuring every dollar moved invisibly through the system. He'd been good at it, meticulous in ways that earned him respect for men who respected very little. Roberto Salazar had trusted him with everything, including the $30 million that was supposed to fund their expansion into Northern California. When that money vanished the night of the hospital massacre, Vicente's carefully built reputation collapsed. The cartel bosses didn't accept excuses. Someone had to answer for the loss, and Vicente, the accountant, the one responsible for knowing where every dollar went, became the obvious target. They'd given him a choice: find the money or disappear permanently. He'd chosen exile, retreating to Mexico City with nothing but his life and a burning need to solve the impossible equation. Where had $30 million vanished to in the chaos of a crime scene? For 3 decades, Vicente had chased ghosts. He'd tracked down witnesses, bribed police officers for access to case files, hired private investigators to follow cold leads that went nowhere. The money had simply evaporated, as if it had never existed. But Vicente understood numbers in ways other people understood breathing, and he knew one fundamental truth: money always left traces. You just had to know where to look. His breakthrough came 6 months ago, buried in hospital administrative records he'd obtained through a contact at San Jose Regional. Security logs from that night showed exactly who'd accessed Trauma Bay 3 before the police lockdown. Dozens of names, doctors, nurses, paramedics, security personnel. Vicente had investigated them all over the years, finding nothing. But this time, he looked deeper, cross-referencing financial records, family histories, unusual expenditures in the months following the incident. Claire Gibbons, RN. trauma nurse on duty that night, single mother, drowning in medical debt. And then, suddenly, her mother receiving experimental cancer treatment that should have been impossible to afford. Small business investments, anonymous charitable donations that increased steadily over 3 decades, following patterns Vicente recognized from his years laundering cartel money. Amounts carefully calculated to stay below federal reporting thresholds. Shell companies with fake addresses. It was elegant work, actually the kind of patient, methodical laundering that most criminals lack the discipline to maintain. Vicente had found his thief. The surveillance began simply. He watched Claire's apartment building from the black SUV, noting her routines, her daughter's visits, the careful modesty of her life. He followed her to work, observing the way colleagues greeted her with genuine warmth, the professional competence she radiated. She'd built something admirable with his organization's money. He'd give her that. But admiration didn't change facts. The money belonged to people who didn't forgive debts, and Vicente's 30-year exile would only end when he recovered what was owed. His first approach to the hospital had been a test, a chance to see how she'd react to questions about 1994. She'd been good, he admitted. Calm, professional, showing nothing. But Vicente had seen the micro-expression of fear that flickered across her face before the mask settled back into place. She knew, and now she knew that he knew. Claire felt it before she saw the evidence. The crawling sensation of being watched that had intensified since Vicente's appearance. The black SUV appeared everywhere. Outside the hospital, near the cafe where she bought coffee, idling across from her apartment building at odd hours. She started varying her routes, checking over her shoulder, lying awake at night listening for sounds that didn't belong. Then Rosemary called, excited about a case breakthrough. Mom, remember those charitable organizations I mentioned? We've connected them to a sophisticated laundering operation. Small donations, shell companies, the whole 9 yards. Whoever set this up was brilliant. It's taken us months to trace the patterns. The money might go back decades, possibly connected to old cartel operations. Claire's hand tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. That's great, honey. I'm proud of you. The words felt like they were spoken by someone else, from very far away. The weird thing is, some of these charities do genuine good work. Women's shelters, scholarships for at-risk kids. It's like someone took dirty money and actually tried to clean it by doing good. I almost respect it. Rosemary laughed, unaware she was describing her mother's life's work. After hanging up, Claire sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, hands shaking too badly to start the engine. Her daughter was investigating her. The irony was almost funny, except nothing about this was funny anymore. The ransacking happened on a Tuesday. Claire came home from her shift to find her apartment door hanging slightly open, the lock professionally picked. Inside, everything had been carefully disturbed. Drawers opened and searched, closet contents shifted, even a mattress moved. But nothing was stolen. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. She found the note on her kitchen counter, written in precise block letters. We need to talk about 1994. Vicente. Claire's hand shook as she burned the note in her sink, watching the paper curl and blacken. Then she began her own systematic destruction. She closed shell accounts she'd maintained for years, transferred funds through laundering chains so complex even Rosemary's task force would struggle to trace them, and burned physical records she'd hidden in a safety deposit box under a false name. 30 years of careful documentation turned to ash in a gas station bathroom trash can. But she knew it wasn't enough. Vicente had found her. The question now was what he wanted. The answer came 2 nights later. Claire was treating a patient with chest pain, routine vitals, EKG, nothing unusual, when she recognized the face. Vicente sat on the examination table, watching her with those calculating eyes that missed nothing. Your blood pressure is elevated, Claire said, her voice professionally detached, even as her pulse hammered. Any history of hypertension? Stress, Vicente replied. I've been searching for something for a very long time. I think I've finally found it. They were alone in the exam room, the privacy curtain pulled. Claire's hand hovered near the call button, but Vicente made no threatening moves. He simply sat there, looking at her with something that might have been respect. "Hello, Claire. I believe you have something that belongs to my organization." The pretense crumbled. Claire's professional mask slipped, revealing the exhaustion and fear beneath. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. February 17th, 1994. Trauma Bay 3. $30 million that vanished while you were the only person with access before the police lockdown. Your mother's miraculous treatment. 30 years of charitable donations, carefully structured to avoid federal reporting." Vicente's voice was soft, almost gentle. "You did good work with it, I'll admit. Better than most people would have. But it was never yours to take. It was blood money," Claire whispered. "I used it to help people. Noble. Irrelevant." Vicente leaned forward. "Here's what happens next. You have 72 hours to produce $30 million, plus interest, which I calculate at approximately $42 million total. Deliver it to me, and you can continue your life, your work, your carefully constructed redemption. Or," he pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of Rosemary leaving the FBI field office. "Your daughter is very beautiful, very accomplished. It would be unfortunate if her investigation led her to discover her own mother's crimes, or if someone decided that the debt you owe should be paid in ways other than money. The cartel is patient, but they always collect." Claire's world tilted. "I don't have it. The money's gone. Scholarships, medical care, shelters. It's been spent over 30 years. Vicente's expression hardened. "Then you have a problem. 72 hours, Claire. Find a solution, where your daughter learns painful lessons about consequence." He walked out of the exam room, leaving Claire standing alone in the fluorescent light, the monitor beeping steadily beside her, measuring a patient's heartbeat while her own world collapsed around her. 72 hours. 3 days to solve an impossible equation. And if she failed, everyone she'd ever try to protect would pay the price. Claire spent the first 12 hours after Vicente's ultimatum doing calculations that led nowhere. She sat at her kitchen table with decades of records spread before her, bank statements from closed accounts, receipts for charitable donations, investment portfolios under false names. The numbers told a story of meticulous care. $400,000 to her mother's treatment over 4 years. Full tuition for Rosemary at Berkeley, another $200,000. The Esperanza Scholarship Foundation had received nearly $3 million over the years, sending 12 young women to college. Women who would have ended up like their mothers, trapped in cycles of poverty and abuse. The Santa Clara Women's Haven had gotten $5 million, housing dozens of women fleeing violence. Medical bills for uninsured patients, community programs, a free clinic in East San Jose. Every dollar accounted for. Every dollar gone. She couldn't produce $30 million. She couldn't even produce $5 million. The money had been transformed into something that couldn't be reversed, into educations and second chances and lives saved. You couldn't take back a scholarship that had already sent someone to medical school. You couldn't reclaim money spent on chemotherapy that had bought someone 4 more years of life. Running was impossible. Claire had learned enough about cartel operations over the years to know that Vicente's organization had networks across multiple countries. If she disappeared, Rosemary would become the leverage. They'd use her daughter to draw Claire out, and Rosemary, with her FBI training and stubborn principles, would fight them every step of the way. The thought of what they'd do to break her made Claire physically ill. The memories came unbidden as she sat in the dark. Her mother's face when she learned the treatment was covered, the way years of pain and worry had simply dissolved into hope. "I don't know how you did it, baby," her mother had whispered, holding Claire's hand in the hospital room. "But you gave me time. That's all anyone really wants, just a little more time." Rosemary's graduation from Berkeley, walking across the stage in her cap and gown, not knowing her education had been bought with blood money. The thank you letters Claire had saved from scholarship recipients. "You changed my life. Because of you, I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. I'm going to be a lawyer now, and I'm going to help women like my mother." The women's shelter opening ceremony, which Claire had watched from a distance, seeing survivors cut the ribbon on a building that would house them safely. 48 women over the years, according to the records. 48 lives pulled back from the edge. Was any of it worth this? Claire called Rosemary the next morning, trying to keep her voice steady. Honey, have you thought about taking some time off? Maybe a vacation? You've been working so hard on this case. Mom, what's going on? Rosemary's voice carried immediate suspicion. You never suggest I take time off work. Are you okay? Is something wrong? I just think you could use a break. Maybe visit your aunt in Portland for a few weeks. I can't leave now. We're close to a breakthrough on the laundering case. Excitement crept into Rosemary's tone. Mom, I'm tracking money that funded some of those charities you've mentioned over the years. The Women's Shelter, the Scholarship Foundation. Someone's been using them to clean cartel money. But here's the thing. The charities actually do legitimate work. It's not a front. Someone actually cared about helping people while laundering millions. Claire's throat constricted. That's interesting. If you know anything about these organizations, if you've ever noticed anything unusual, it could help the investigation. Rosemary paused. Mom, you're being weird. What aren't you telling me? The confession hung on Claire's tongue, desperate to emerge after 30 years of silence. I'm the one you're investigating. I stole the money because I was desperate and scared and I couldn't watch my mother die. I used it to help people because that was the only way I could live with what I'd done. And now the people I stole from have found me, and they're going to hurt you because of my choices. But the words wouldn't come. Speaking them would destroy everything. Rosemary's career, their relationship, the fragile peace Claire had built. So she swallowed the truth like poison and lied to her daughter one more time. Nothing, honey. I'm just worried about you. Be careful, okay? After they hung up, Claire saw the news report. A woman named Brenda Castellanos, a former nurse at San Jose Regional who'd worked the night of the shooting, had died in a car accident. Single vehicle collision, ruled accidental. But Claire remembered Brenda's face from 1994, remembered her working the adjacent trauma bay. She'd been one of the few people who might have seen something. Vicente was eliminating witnesses. The realization crystallized Claire's decision. She couldn't run, couldn't pay, couldn't confess. The only option left was negotiation. Maybe Vicente would accept something other than money. Information, cooperation, anything that would buy Rosemary's safety. She texted the number on his card. We need to talk. Name a place. His response came within minutes. Warehouse on 7th Street, near the old cannery. Midnight. Come alone. Claire arrived early, parking her Honda 3 blocks away and approaching on foot. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, windows broken and dark, the kind of place where bad things happened. She thought about turning back, about calling the police, about doing anything other than walking into an obvious trap. But Vicente had Rosemary's photo. Vicente knew where she lived. Vicente had already killed Brenda Castellanos. She stepped inside. Vicente waited in the center of the empty space, illuminated by a single battery-powered lamp. 2 other men flanked him in the shadows, enforcers, judging by their builds and the guns visible at their waists. You came, Vicente said. I respect that. I can't give you the money. Claire's voice was steadier than she felt. It's gone. Spent. But maybe we can work something out. There's nothing to work out, Claire. The organization doesn't accept payment plans or alternative arrangements. They want what's owed, or they want blood. Preferably both. Then why give me 72 hours? Why not just kill me? Vicente's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because what you did was remarkable, in its way. You took cartel money and actually used it for good. That's ballsy. Stupid, but ballsy. Most people would have bought mansions and cars and ended up dead within months. You stayed small, stayed careful, and genuinely helped people for 30 years. I can respect that even as I have to make you pay for it. So, there's no negotiation. I didn't say that. There's always negotiation. Vicente stepped closer. But you need to understand, I've been in exile for 30 years because of you. My reputation, my position, my life, all destroyed because I couldn't explain where that money went. Finding you is my ticket home. If I return empty-handed, I'm dead. So the question becomes, whose life matters more? Mine, Yours or your daughter's? Claire felt the trap closing. Don't touch her. Then give me a reason not to. Before Claire could answer, headlights swept across the warehouse entrance. A car pulled up, Vicente's men tensing, hands moving toward weapons. But Vicente held up a hand, listening to something on an earpiece Claire hadn't noticed. His expression shifted to cold satisfaction. Your daughter is very predictable. She went home after work, just like always. My people are already inside her apartment. The world stopped. No, this wasn't the deal. The deal was you produce the money or face consequences. You didn't produce the money. Vicente gestured to his man. Escort Miss Gibbons out, and make sure she knows we're serious about collecting what's owed. Claire ran. She burst from the warehouse and sprinted toward her car, Vicente's laughter echoing behind her. She drove like a madwoman through San Jose's streets, running red lights. Her phone pressed to her ear as she called Rosemary's number over and over. No answer. No answer. No answer. She arrived at Rosemary's apartment building to find the front door standing open. Neighbors clustered in the hallway, speaking in hushed, frightened voices. Claire pushed through them and found Rosemary's door kicked in, the apartment in chaos. Furniture overturned, lamps smashed, clear signs of struggle. And on the kitchen counter, written in what looked like lipstick, 72 hours is over. Now we negotiate differently. A neighbor touched Claire's shoulder. The police are coming. Someone heard gunshots, screaming. A woman being dragged to a van. I'm so sorry. But Claire was already moving, already calling the one number she'd sworn she'd never call. The one that would end everything but might, just might, save her daughter's life. She called the FBI. The video arrived at 3 a.m., sent from an unknown number to Claire's phone. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Rosemary bound to a chair in what looked like a basement, duct tape across her mouth, eyes wide with fear and fury. A hand reached into frame and yanked the tape away. Mom, Rosemary's voice cracked. Mom, don't give them what they... The tape was replaced roughly. Then Vicente's voice, calm and professional. Bring the money to the old hospital warehouse district. Come alone. Midnight tonight. Or she dies slowly. And I make sure you watch every second. The video ended. Claire sat on her apartment floor, phone clutched in shaking hands, and felt 30 years of carefully constructed lies finally, catastrophically crumble. There was no more running, no more negotiating, no more pretending she could protect everyone while maintaining her secret. The only path forward required destroying everything she'd built. But if it saved Rosemary, it would be worth it. She drove to the FBI field office as dawn broke over San Jose, walked past security with her nurse's ID still clipped to her jacket, and asked for Agent Mitchell Brennan, Rosemary's partner, the man who joined them for awkward family dinners where Claire had smiled and made small talk while hiding the truth. Brennan appeared in the lobby, concern already etched on his face. Ms. Gibbons? What's wrong? Is this about Rosemary? She didn't report for work this morning. I need to tell you something, Claire said, her voice hollow. And when I'm done, you're going to arrest me. But first, you need to help me save my daughter. They took her to an interview room, windowless, sterile, a table bolted to the floor. Claire had imagined this moment for 30 years, rehearsed countless versions of confession in her darkest nightmares. None of them had prepared her for the reality of speaking the words aloud. February 17th, 1994. The Cartel shooting at San Jose Regional Medical Center. I was the trauma nurse on duty. There was $30 million in a duffel bag beneath the victim's gurney. I stole it. The words came faster now, tumbling out after 3 decades of silence. I used it to pay for my mother's cancer treatment. Then I laundered the rest over 30 years, small amounts, shell companies, charitable donations. The Gibbons Foundation, the Women's Haven, the Esperanza scholarships. All of it. That's the case Rosemary's been investigating. She's been investigating me. Brennan's expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally a kind of stunned comprehension. You're telling me the charitable organizations we've been tracking, the ones that actually help people, all blood money. It was blood money, Claire said, meeting his eyes. I made it into hope. I sent 12 women to college. I housed dozens of domestic violence survivors. I paid medical bills for people who would have died without treatment. Does that count for nothing? It counts for something, but it doesn't erase the theft. Brennan leaned forward. Why are you telling me this now? Claire showed him the video. He'll kill her the moment he realizes it's fake, Claire said. We'll have shooters positioned. We won't let that happen. Brennan's voice was firm, but Claire saw the uncertainty in his eyes. They both knew how quickly things could go wrong. They wired her in a van parked 3 blocks from the warehouse, a female agent taping the transmitter to Claire's ribs while others tested audio levels. The fake money bag sat nearby, surprisingly convincing. Claire stared at them and thought about all the real money she'd moved over the years, the careful calculations that had kept her invisible for 3 decades. Before they left for the warehouse, Brennan handed her a phone. If you want to record a message for Rosemary, just in case, now's the time. Claire took the phone to a corner of the van and pressed record. Rosemary, if you're hearing this, it means something went wrong, and I need you to know the truth. Everything I did, the theft, the lies, 30 years of deception, I did it because I was desperate and scared and I thought I could turn something evil into something good. I wanted to save my mother. Then I wanted to save you from the poverty I grew up in. Then I wanted to save all the other people who were desperate and scared like I'd been. But I was wrong to lie to you. Wrong to build your life on a foundation of stolen money. Wrong to let you become the good person I could never be while hiding what I'd done. I love you. I'm so sorry. And whatever happens tonight, at least I finally told the truth. Midnight found Claire walking into the warehouse district, 2 duffel bags weighing down her arms. The FBI was positioned in the surrounding buildings, snipers on rooftops, tactical teams in adjacent warehouses, Brennan coordinating from a command vehicle 2 blocks away. Claire's wire transmitted every sound, her footsteps on concrete, her ragged breathing, the distant hum of traffic. Vicente emerged from the shadows of the old hospital warehouse, and behind him, 2 men held Rosemary between them. Her face was bruised, but her eyes blazed with defiance. When she saw Claire, confusion flickered across her features. Mom, what are you doing here? How did you? I brought what you asked for, Claire said to Vicente, her voice steady despite the wire pressed against her racing heart. 30 million. Let her go. Vicente approached, gestured for the bags. His men pushed Rosemary forward slightly, close enough for Claire to see the cut on her daughter's temple, the rope burns on her wrists. Vicente opened the first bag, ran his hands through the stacks of bills. For a moment, Claire thought it might actually work. Then Vicente pulled out a bill from the middle of the stack and examined it. Paper. Just paper. His expression went cold. You brought police. After everything, you're still lying. Rosemary's gaze dropped to Claire's jacket, and even in the dim light, she must have seen the wire's outline. Understanding crashed across her face like a wave. Mom, what did you do? I stole $30 million from the cartel 30 years ago, Claire said, the confession emerging even as Vicente's men reached for weapons. I used it to save your grandmother, to pay for your education, to help people, and I've been lying to you about it your entire life. Vicente's laugh was bitter. You confessed to the FBI. You're wearing a wire. You really think you're walking out of here? FBI, hands up. The shout came from multiple directions as tactical teams burst through doors, red laser sights painting Vicente's chest. But Vicente had prepared for this possibility. He raised his hand, and explosions rocked the far side of the warehouse, pre-planted charges blowing out walls, creating chaos and smoke and confusion. Vicente's men opened fire, and the FBI returned it, and suddenly the night was full of gunshots and screaming and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Claire saw it happen in slow motion. One of Vicente's enforcers swinging his weapon toward Rosemary, who was stumbling through the smoke, hands still bound. Claire moved without thinking, throwing herself between the gun and her daughter. The impact felt like being hit by a truck, sharp pain blooming in her shoulder, the force spinning her around. She and Rosemary collapsed together onto the concrete as the firefight raged above them. Mom! Rosemary's voice was raw with terror. Mom, stay with me. I'm okay. Claire gasped, though blood was spreading across her jacket. I'm okay. Are you hurt? The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. FBI agents swarmed the warehouse, securing suspects. Vicente had escaped in the confusion, vanishing through an exit he'd prepared, but his organization was exposed, his men in custody. Claire heard Brennan shouting for a medic as hands lifted her onto a stretcher. In the ambulance, with paramedics working on her shoulder wound, Rosemary gripped her hand with bound wrists that an FBI agent was carefully cutting free. Her daughter's face was streaked with tears and smoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rosemary whispered. "Because telling you would make you complicit." Claire's vision was starting to blur, shock and blood loss pulling her toward darkness. "I wanted you to be good. Really good. Not like me. Everything I built for you, your education, your career, your clean conscience, I couldn't let you know it came from blood money. You threw yourself in front of a bullet for me. Of course I did. You're my daughter. You're the one good thing I did right." Claire's eyes closed. "I'm sorry. For all of it. I'm so sorry." She woke in a hospital room to find federal agents posted outside her door and Brennan sitting in the visitor's chair. Her shoulder was bandaged, her wrist handcuffed to the bed rail. "Rosemary," she croaked. "She's fine. Shaken up, but fine. She'll want to see you, but—" Brennan gestured to the handcuff. "Claire Gibbons, you're under arrest for theft, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent." As he read her rights, Claire felt something she hadn't experienced in 30 years. The profound relief of having nothing left to hide. She destroyed her life, but saved her daughter. She'd confessed her crimes, but finally told the truth. After 3 decades of running, she was finally, mercifully free. "I understand," she said when Brennan finished. "I'm ready." And for the first time since that night in 1994, she meant it. The trial became a media sensation within days. The Robin Hood nurse dominated headlines across California and then the nation. A woman who'd stolen millions from a drug cartel and spent 3 decades quietly transforming blood money into scholarships, shelter beds, and second chances. Public opinion fractured along predictable lines. Some called her a hero, others a criminal who'd simply found a more palatable way to spend stolen money. Talk shows debated the ethics. Social media exploded with hashtags on both sides. Claire sat in the federal courthouse in San Jose, wearing the simple gray suit her public defender had suggested, and watched her life dissected by strangers. The prosecution's case was straightforward and damning. Regardless of how the money was ultimately used, theft was theft. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh laid out 30 years of money laundering with clinical precision. The shell companies, the false names, the carefully structured donations designed to evade federal reporting requirements. "Ms. Gibbons wants you to focus on the good she did," Walsh told the jury during her opening statement. "But the law doesn't allow criminals to steal money and then claim righteousness because they gave it to charity. By that logic, any thief could rob a bank and avoid prosecution by donating the proceeds to a homeless shelter." The defense countered with context. A desperate woman facing her mother's death, a split-second decision in a chaotic crime scene, and 3 decades of genuine charitable work that had transformed countless lives. Claire's attorney, a passionate public defender named Ramon Torres, built his case around unusual circumstances and extraordinary cooperation that had led to major cartel arrests. But the moment Claire had dreaded most came when Rosemary took the stand. Her daughter had aged years in the weeks since the warehouse. The cut on her temple had healed, but something in her eyes looked permanently altered. The certainty that came from believing you knew your parent, shattered in a single night. She wore her FBI credentials like armor as she was sworn in, and when she looked at Claire, the complexity of emotion there was almost unbearable. "Agent Gibbons," Walsh began, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" "She's my mother." Rosemary's voice was steady, professional. "She raised me alone after my father left. She worked nights at the hospital so she could be home during the day while I was young. She was the most important person in my life." "Were you aware of her criminal activities?" "No. I had no knowledge of the theft or the money laundering until the night I was taken hostage." Walsh walked Rosemary through the facts methodically. Claire's deception, the scope of the laundering operation, the FBI investigation that had unknowingly targeted her own mother. With each answer, Claire felt the knife of consequence twist deeper. But when Torres cross-examined, Rosemary's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Agent Gibbons, you testified that your mother paid for your education at Berkeley. Did you know where that money came from? No. If you had known, would you have accepted it? Rosemary's hands clenched in her lap. I don't know. I like to think I would have refused, but I was 18. I wanted to go to college desperately. So I honestly don't know what I would have done. Your mother took a bullet for you during the warehouse operation. Why do you think she did that? Because she loves me. Rosemary's voice finally broke. Because despite everything she did wrong, she's still my mother, and she would die to protect me. No further questions. As Rosemary left the stand, she met Claire's eyes for the first time since the trial began. The look they shared contained 30 years of love and lies, sacrifice and betrayal, and something that might eventually become forgiveness. The character witnesses told stories that painted a picture far more complex than simple criminality. A young woman named Gabriela Martinez, now a civil rights attorney, described receiving the Esperanza scholarship that had lifted her out of an abusive home and sent her to law school. Ms. Gibbons's money gave me a future. I don't know how to reconcile that with where it came from, but I know that without it, I'd probably be dead. The director of the Santa Clara Women's Haven testified that their anonymous benefactor had funded beds for 48 women over 15 years. These weren't just donations. This was sustained, thoughtful support that saved lives. Women who would have gone back to their abusers because they had nowhere else to go found safety because of that money. Former patients spoke of medical bills mysteriously paid, of treatments they couldn't afford suddenly becoming possible. Dr. Patel from the hospital took the stand and described Claire as the finest nurse I've worked with in 30 years. Whatever she did in her personal life, she saved lives professionally. That has to count for something. When Claire finally testified, she took full responsibility without reservation. Torres had advised her to show remorse, but Claire insisted on a different approach. Honesty, finally, without filters or justifications. I'm guilty, she told the jury, her voice calm. I stole $30 million. I laundered it over 3 decades. I lied to my daughter, to my colleagues, to everyone in my life. But I want you to understand something. I didn't waste a single dollar on myself. Not one. Every penny went to helping people who were desperate like I've been desperate. If I'm punished for giving hope to the hopeless, I'll accept that. But I won't pretend I regret helping them. The trial lasted 3 weeks. While it proceeded, news broke that Vicente Ruiz had been captured in Mexico and extradited to face charges for kidnapping, attempted murder, and racketeering. The man who'd spent 30 years hunting Claire would likely die in prison, a symmetry that felt almost poetic. The verdict came on a gray afternoon in November. Guilty on all counts. But Judge Patricia Huang, a stern woman known for harsh sentencing, surprised everyone during the sentencing hearing. Ms. Gibbons, what you did was unquestionably criminal. You stole money, laundered it, and built a life on deception. However, I've listened to 3 weeks of testimony about the good you've done with that stolen money. I've heard from women who would be dead without the shelter you funded, from young women who escaped poverty because of scholarships you provided, from patients who received life-saving treatment they couldn't afford. The law requires me to punish you. My conscience requires me to acknowledge the complexity of what you've done. Judge Huang sentenced Claire to 8 years in federal prison, with credit for cooperation and eligibility for parole in 5. All charitable organizations funded by the stolen money would have to disclose their source, but could continue operating under new, legitimate management. The scholarships would continue. The women's shelter would remain open. The good Claire had done wouldn't be erased, only honestly acknowledged. Claire served her time at FCI Dublin, a federal women's prison in Northern California. She adapted quickly, her nursing skills making her invaluable in a prison medical facility. She treated inmates with the same compassion she'd shown patients at San Jose Regional, listening to their stories, holding their hands through difficult diagnoses, becoming once again the steady presence in chaos. Rosemary visited monthly, though the early conversations were strained and careful. They talked around the hard topics at first. Rosemary's cases, Claire's work in the prison clinic, neutral subjects that didn't require examining the crater of betrayal between them. But gradually, over years of honest conversations without the burden of lies, something began to heal. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. The recognition that love and disappointment could coexist, that someone could be both hero and criminal, mother and thief. Claire mentored younger inmates, many of them mothers who'd made desperate choices not unlike her own. She taught them about accountability without shame, about facing consequences while maintaining dignity. In a strange way, prison gave her what 30 years of freedom never had, the ability to help people honestly, without lies corroding everything she touched. 5 years and 2 months after her sentencing, Claire walked out of FCI, Dublin, into November sunshine. She was 57 now, her hair more gray than blonde, but her eyes held a clarity they'd lacked for decades. Rosemary waited by her car, and when Claire approached, her daughter pulled her into a fierce hug that felt like both forgiveness and grief. "Ready?" Rosemary asked. "More than you know." Claire started work the following week at the Santa Clara Women's Haven. Not as a secret benefactor, but as a paid employee, processing intake paperwork and helping new residents navigate the maze of restraining orders and housing assistance. The director knew her history. Everyone did now. Some of the women she helped were wary at first, uncomfortable accepting assistance from someone who'd laundered cartel money. But others, especially those who'd received scholarships years earlier, welcomed her with recognition and understanding. One afternoon, a young woman named Teresa arrived at the shelter with 2 children and a black eye, fleeing a husband who'd put her in the hospital 3 times. As Claire helped her fill out forms, Teresa said, quietly, "I got one of those Esperanza scholarships 10 years ago. Because of that, I have a nursing degree. I have options. I'm not trapped like my mother was." Claire's hand stilled on the paperwork. "I'm glad. You deserve that chance. I know where the money came from now. Everyone knows. But you know what? It still changed my life. I guess I'm learning that things can be complicated." On Sunday, Claire and Rosemary drove to the cemetery where Claire's mother was buried. They stood before the simple headstone in comfortable silence before Claire finally spoke. "I spent 30 years thinking I was protecting you from the truth. Really, I was protecting myself from accountability, from having to face what I'd done and who I'd become." Rosemary was quiet for a long moment. "You did something terrible, and something beautiful. I'm still learning to hold both truths at once. Maybe I always will be. That's more grace than I deserve. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what you deserve. Not forgiveness, but the chance to earn it honestly this time." They visited for another hour, talking about Claire's mother, about the choices that had led to that night in 1994, about the long road ahead. When they finally left, Rosemary dropped Claire at the women's shelter for her evening shift. Inside, a new resident was having a panic attack, overwhelmed by the enormity of leaving her abuser and starting over. Claire sat with her, held her hand, and talked her through breathing exercises, the same steady, compassionate care she'd given for 35 years, first as a nurse and now as something harder to define. The woman's breathing eventually steadied. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how I'm going to do this. One day at a time," Claire said. "One honest choice after another. It's harder than the alternative, but it's the only way that lasts." As she helped the woman settle into her room, Claire thought about the 3 decades she'd spent buying redemption with stolen money, the scholarships and shelter beds and medical bills, all of it built on a foundation of lies. It had helped people, genuinely helped them, but it had also corrupted everything it touched, including herself. Now, finally, she was earning redemption the legitimate way, through honest work, through facing consequences, through the slow, difficult process of proving that people could change. She'd spent 30 years running from the truth. Now, finally, she was learning to live with it. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like freedom.